I can usually tell whether a woman feels confident before I ever see her face. Not by her shoes, not by the handbag resting on her shoulder, and surprisingly, not even by her blouse. I notice it in the way her trousers move when she walks. That may sound like an impossible claim, but after spending decades designing garments, fitting thousands of women, and watching them take those first uncertain steps toward the mirror, I've learned something the fashion world rarely says out loud. A pair of pants never simply covers the body. It either carries your presence or quietly competes with it. I've watched remarkable women stand a little shorter because the wrong cut stole their balance. And I've seen women who believed they had nothing special suddenly appear graceful, composed, and unmistakably elegant, all because a different silhouette finally allowed them to move as themselves. The difference was never age. It was never weight. It was never the number stitched inside the waistband. It was design. Today, I don't want to convince you to chase trends or replace your entire wardrobe. Instead, I'd like to invite you behind the curtain of fashion design, where the smallest decisions often create the biggest impressions. We'll explore why certain trousers quietly diminish a woman's presence after 60, what truly makes a silhouette timeless, and how the right pair can restore something far more valuable than style. It can restore the quiet confidence that was never gone, only hidden. There is a question I ask during nearly every fitting, and it often surprises people. Is your body resisting the pants? Or are the pants resisting your body? Most women instinctively blame themselves. They stand a little straighter, pull in their stomach, smooth the fabric over their hips, and quietly assume that age has changed everything. But after years in design studios, I can tell you something with complete confidence. The body is rarely the problem. More often than not, the garment is asking the body to become something it no longer needs to be. A well-designed pair of trousers never argues with the woman wearing it. It follows her. It respects the way she stands, the rhythm of her stride, and the natural balance that only experience can bring. A poor design does the opposite. It pulls where the body wants to relax. It stiffens where movement should feel effortless. It creates tension where elegance should feel almost invisible. And this is where many women begin believing they've lost their figure, when in reality, they've only been wearing clothing designed for a completely different silhouette. I remember watching a client step out of the fitting room wearing a pair of perfectly fashionable trousers. They were expensive, beautifully made. Every magazine praised that style. Yet something felt wrong, not because the trousers were unattractive, because they insisted on being noticed before she was. The waist sat just high enough to shorten her torso. The fabric held itself more firmly than it held her movement. Every step looked slightly interrupted, as though the garment wanted to lead and she was expected to follow. That is not elegance. Elegance is never a negotiation. It is harmony. And this is where most fashion advice gets it completely wrong. People obsess over whether a leg is wide or narrow, cropped or full length. A designer looks somewhere else first. We look for resistance. Does the fabric move with the woman? Or does the woman spend the entire day adjusting the fabric? That single question reveals more than any trend forecast ever could. The most graceful women I've dressed over the years were never the ones wearing the newest silhouettes. They were the ones whose clothing seemed to disappear the moment they began to move. Because when trousers stop demanding attention, the woman finally receives it. Before I sketch a silhouette, before I think about pockets, pleats, or hems, I touch the fabric, because fabric tells the truth long before a mirror does. This may sound poetic, but every designer knows it is also practical. Fabric has a memory. It remembers where it was stretched. It remembers where it was folded. It remembers every hour you spent sitting through a dinner, driving across town, or waiting quietly in an airport lounge. Some fabrics recover with grace. Others hold on to every crease as if collecting little reminders of the day. And over time, those reminders begin to shape the impression people receive before you've spoken a single word. This is why two pairs of trousers can share the same color, the same cut, and even the same price. Yet one continues to look composed after hours of wear, while the other seems tired before lunch. The difference is rarely visible on the hanger. It appears only when life begins. I once watched two women leave a fitting wearing nearly identical trousers. 30 minutes later, one pair still flowed with every step. The other had developed sharp wrinkles across the lap, behind the knees, and around the hips. Neither woman had done anything wrong. One fabric understood movement. The other fought against it. That distinction is invisible in a dressing room, but impossible to ignore in the real world. Now here's the part nobody talks about. Many women shop while standing perfectly still beneath flattering store lighting. But elegance is never judged while standing still. It is judged when you reach for a coffee cup, when you step out of your car, when you greet old friends with a warm embrace, when you cross a room without thinking about what you're wearing. That is the true runway of everyday life. As designers, we don't fall in love with beautiful fabric. We fall in love with fabric that remains beautiful after living an ordinary day. Because luxury has never been about perfection. It has always been about recovery. A graceful pair of trousers doesn't ask your body to remain motionless in order to look elegant. It welcomes every movement and still returns to its original character. That quiet resilience is one of the finest qualities a woman can wear after 60. Not because it hides age, but because it reflects something far more meaningful. A life that has been lived fully, yet still carries itself with remarkable grace. One of the greatest misunderstandings in fashion is the belief that elegance has a price tag. It doesn't. I've seen beautifully tailored trousers hanging beneath the lights of luxury boutiques, and I've watched them lose every trace of sophistication the moment someone put them on. Not because they were poorly made, but because they were beautifully made, for the wrong proportions. This is something every experienced designer learns sooner or later. A garment can be technically perfect and visually disappointing at the very same time. People often ask me how I can recognize quality from across a room. The answer surprises them. I rarely look at the fabric first. I look at the balance. Where does the waistband begin? Where do the pockets draw your eye? Does the crease guide the gaze upward, or stop it halfway? Does the hem finish the silhouette, or cut it apart? These details are so subtle that most people never consciously notice them, yet they shape the entire impression. Think of architecture for a moment. A beautiful building isn't memorable because one window is extraordinary. It's memorable because every line belongs to every other line. Clothing follows the same quiet logic. When the proportions are in harmony, your eyes never stop to question what they're seeing. They simply accept the image as refined. This sounds like a small detail, but it changes everything. I've watched women spend hundreds of dollars searching for luxury while overlooking the simplest question of all. Does this design allow my eye to travel smoothly from my shoulders all the way to the floor? If the answer is no, the garment begins breaking the silhouette into smaller pieces. A shortened torso, heavier hips, interrupted lines, nothing dramatic. Just enough visual noise to make elegance disappear. That is why some women wearing modest brands often appear remarkably polished, while others dressed entirely in designer labels never quite achieve the same quiet authority. Luxury has never been a logo, it has never been a price, and it has certainly never been about proving that something was expensive. True luxury is balance so effortless that nobody notices the garment before they notice the woman. As designers, that is the highest compliment we can ever receive. When someone says, "She looked extraordinary," and forgets to mention what she was wearing, because in the end, great trousers were never meant to become the center of attention. They were designed to become invisible, so that your presence could become unforgettable. There is a habit I've never managed to lose. Even after all these years, whenever someone walks toward me wearing a new pair of trousers, I listen before I look. Most people think fashion is entirely visual. It isn't. A truly refined garment speaks through movement long before it speaks through appearance. In every runway rehearsal I attended, there came a moment when the music stopped. The room became almost silent. That silence revealed things no spotlight ever could. You could hear a fabric pulling against itself. You could hear heavy seams resisting each step. You could hear trousers announcing their presence before the woman wearing them ever had the chance. And once you learn to recognize those sounds, you never forget them. Because elegance has a rhythm. It is quiet. It is effortless. It never asks to be noticed. Now here's something that rarely leaves the design studio. The finest trousers are almost silent. Not because the fabric is thin, not because the construction is weak, but because every element has been balanced so carefully that nothing struggles against the next. The fabric glides, the seams rest naturally, the cut follows the body's movement instead of interrupting it. You may never consciously hear that harmony, but strangely enough, you almost always feel it. Have you ever met a woman who seemed graceful without doing anything extraordinary? She wasn't walking like a model. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She simply crossed the room, and somehow the entire space felt calmer. That impression is never created by confidence alone. Very often, it begins with clothing that never argues with the body. Not dramatic, not theatrical, just beautifully composed. This is why I often encourage women to do something unusual before buying a pair of trousers. Don't spend your first minute looking in the mirror. Walk, sit down, stand up again. Climb a few steps if you can. Reach into your handbag, turn naturally, and then, listen, not only with your ears, with your body. Does anything pull? Does anything catch? Does the fabric seem impatient with your movement? Or does it quietly disappear, allowing you to forget you're even wearing it? That is one of the oldest lessons I learned as a designer. The greatest garments never remind you that they exist. They simply allow you to become more completely yourself. And perhaps that is what elegance has always been. Not clothing demanding attention, but clothing making room for the woman inside it. Many years ago, an editor asked me a question after one of my collections debuted. She said, "Who do you imagine when you're designing?" I answered without thinking, "Never the woman standing in front of a mirror. Always the woman who has already forgotten she's getting dressed." That answer surprised her, but it has guided nearly every design decision I've made. Because mirrors are honest, yet they are also incomplete. A mirror captures a single moment. Life never does. Life catches you reaching for your granddaughter's hand before crossing the street. It catches you laughing before you're aware of your smile. It catches you turning when someone unexpectedly calls your name. Those are the moments that define presence, not the 5 seconds spent standing perfectly still in front of perfect lighting. And yet, this is exactly where so many wardrobes begin. Women stand in a fitting room, facing a mirror that never asks them to move. The trousers appear elegant, the proportions seem balanced. Everything feels promising. Then real life begins. The fabric twists slightly while walking. The waistband shifts after sitting. The hem catches the back of the shoe. Tiny interruptions, almost invisible. But together, they quietly disturb the calmness that true elegance depends upon. And this is where most women get it completely wrong. They blame the mirror. Or worse, they blame themselves. Instead of asking a far more useful question, did I choose clothing for a photograph? Or for a life? As a designer, I have never believed that beautiful clothing exists to survive a fitting room. It exists to accompany a woman through ordinary moments with extraordinary ease, through morning errands, an afternoon lunch with old friends, a family celebration, a quiet dinner where no one remembers exactly what she wore, only how effortlessly elegant she seemed. That is the standard I trust. If a pair of trousers only looks beautiful while you're standing still, it was never truly designed for you. Because elegance is not measured by the reflection looking back from a mirror. It is measured by how naturally you move once you've forgotten the mirror was ever there. And perhaps that is the greatest compliment clothing can receive. Not that it makes a woman look different, but that it allows her to feel so completely herself, she no longer thinks about what she's wearing at all. There is a sentence I have repeated to young designers for years. At first, they usually disagree with me. Then, after enough fittings, they begin to understand. If people remember the trousers more than the woman, the design has failed. That may sound unfair. After all, designers spend months refining a silhouette, adjusting a seam by a few millimeters, searching for the perfect drape. Shouldn't the clothing deserve attention? Of course it should, but only for a moment. Then it must quietly step aside. The greatest garments have always possessed a kind of humility. They never compete with the woman wearing them. They complete her, and then almost disappear. I've seen this happen countless times. A woman walks into a room wearing trousers with dramatic hardware, oversized pockets, exaggerated shapes, or details carefully chosen to attract admiration. People notice the trousers. They may even compliment them. But strangely, they remember very little about the woman herself. Now imagine another woman entering the same room. Nothing she wears demands applause. The fabric falls naturally. The proportions feel calm. The silhouette is balanced without trying to prove anything. Hours later, someone says, "There was something incredibly elegant about her." Notice the difference. They don't describe the trousers. They describe the woman. This sounds subtle, but it is one of the highest principles in design. Fashion should never replace personality. It should reveal it. As I've grown older, I've become less interested in creating clothes that impress people from across the room. I'm far more interested in creating clothes that allow someone to feel quietly authentic from within. Because confidence that depends on clothing is fragile. But confidence that clothing simply supports can last a lifetime. Perhaps that is why so many women discover their true style after 60. Not because they suddenly understand fashion, but because they stop asking, "What will people notice?" and begin asking, "What allows me to feel most like myself?" That is the question every great pair of trousers should answer. Not with decoration, not with trends, not with a famous label, but with silence. The kind of silence that allows your character, your grace, your years, and your unmistakable presence to enter the room before anyone remembers what you were wearing. Because beautiful trousers were never meant to become your identity, they were meant to protect it. After all these years, people still ask me the same question. What should a woman stop wearing after 60? The longer I spend in this profession, the less interested I become in answering that question. Because style has never been built by removing one pair of trousers and replacing it with another. Style is built the moment clothing begins respecting the woman, instead of asking the woman to adapt to it. That, to me, is the quiet difference between getting dressed and dressing with intention. If there is one thought I hope stays with you after today, let it be this. The most elegant trousers in the world are never the ones that attract the most attention. They are the ones that allow your posture to relax, your movement to flow naturally, your presence to arrive before your clothing ever does. By the time we reach our 60s, we have already earned something far more valuable than fashion. We have earned perspective. And perspective has a beautiful way of simplifying everything. You no longer need a wardrobe that tries to impress every stranger. You need clothing that quietly honors the woman you have spent a lifetime becoming. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever owned a pair of trousers that looked wonderful in the mirror, but somehow never felt right once you stepped outside? Share your experience in the comments. I read them more often than you might imagine, and some of my favorite conversations begin there. And if today's conversation changed the way you think about trousers, I hope you'll join me again. In our next video, we'll explore something even more fascinating. Not the clothes that make a woman look older, but the subtle details that make an ordinary outfit feel unmistakably timeless. Until then, dress with quiet confidence, walk with ease, and never let your clothing speak louder than you do.